Good to have you with us. 25 minutes after 7. We are awaiting the Health Ministry briefing there. You can see it expected to get underway at 7:30 this morning. Before we get to that, former Deputy Chief Justice Dikgang Moseneke is recommending that the upcoming local government elections should be postponed. Moseneke and a panel have found that it's not reasonably possible or likely that the elections will be held in a free and fair manner. A lot to do, of course, with COVID-19. The Commission will provide a report on its considerations because of the COVID-19 pandemic to the IEC. We're joined this morning by Professor Jaap De Visser from the Dullah Omar Institute for more reaction on this. Prof, good morning to you. What do you make of this, we're going to call it the Moseneke report for the upcoming elections? What's your reaction?
Well, I mean, some would say that the Moseneke report really throws a curveball at the IEC and government because it's a real fix that government finds itself in. On the one hand, you've got very good reasons to postpone the elections given the pandemic. On the other hand, you've got a constitution that is very clear that says the term of councils ends on the 3rd of August and you've got 90 days to hold an election. And over and above that, the Constitution promises in Section 1, the very first section of the Constitution, that we're going to have regular elections. So changing that is going to require a 75% majority in the National Assembly and 6 out of 9 provinces in the NCOP agreeing. And we don't really have much time to do that anyway. Time is running out to really achieve that if we would want to do so. And I think that's one of the reasons why the Moseneke report suggests that government should approach a court to have the elections postponed, which is a very drastic option because normally Constitutional Court would assess whether or not law or conduct is consistent with the Constitution. That is its role. And now we're going to ask it to do something outside of the Constitution, to suspend a provision in the Constitution or somehow override the Constitution. And that's very unusual. It's never been done before.
Yeah. Just to remind viewers, when that report came out, Prof, that the suggestion and the recommendation was that instead of having the elections in October of this year, it would be pushed out to February of next year. Tumelo, my colleague, spoke to Musima Imani, I think it was yesterday, and he was saying that regardless of when these elections might be pushed out until we could still be in a third wave, we could be in a fourth wave, the solution is not to push the elections out further and further. Constitutionally, as you say, there's a limit as to how far we can go. It's more about the IEC changing the way the elections are held, perhaps spreading it out over a few more days to try and pull back on the super spreader concerns. What do you make of that as a suggestion?
Well, that's definitely a very good suggestion, and would be argued about those in favor of holding the elections as soon as possible. What comes out in the report is that there are reasons, though, to argue otherwise. There are a lot of things that we normally do around elections that we cannot do in a sort of a lockdown scenario. For example, face-to-face voter registration will not be possible. The nomination of independent candidates, an independent candidate gets nominated by 50 signatures from people in the ward. And I would imagine those are what they call wet signatures. So how do you collect 50 wet signatures in a lockdown scenario, and don't you put people at risk? Campaigning and rallying is going to be very different. It's going to have to be online. And the argument in the report is that this compromises smaller parties that may not be able to switch from rallies and et cetera to online campaigning. So there are reasons in favor and against. What's very interesting in the report as well is that not all the scientists are actually in agreement. Professor Karim was actually arguing that maybe it's best to have the elections end of October because we'll be having a bit of a lull in infections during that time. So, there are lots of arguments going around, and it's a real constitutional dilemma.
It really is. And where does the Dullah Omar Institute land on this dilemma?
I think the one thing that we should really avoid is postponing the elections willy-nilly. I mean, there are countries on the continent that have, for example, postponed local government elections indefinitely, for all kinds of spurious reasons. And I don't think that's on the cards here. And I think Moseneke is very clear and said this must be a once-off issue. This is not a slippery slope. That's also why a constitutional amendment is not preferred. So let's rather ask the Constitutional Court. And I think maybe it's a good thing that the Constitutional Court expresses itself on this issue. If the Constitutional Court says, no, this is not on. We're not going to go outside of the Constitution. Then at least we would have tried everything possible to have the elections postponed.
And when do you believe would be the cutoff, whether it be from a legal perspective, a Concord perspective, or a free and fair perspective, Prof, for Parliament, and you mentioned the NCOP, to make this decision? I mean, we're heading towards the end of July very quickly. We've got August, September, and then we're supposed to be heading to the polls. Time is against us, isn't it?
Yeah, certainly for a constitutional amendment, time is really against us. If government would choose that route and go against the Moseneke report, it would have to really start that almost within a few days to really have a chance of meeting that deadline, because the Constitution puts time frames for constitutional amendments that basically result in that lasting at least 2, if not 3 months. So that's almost impossible. Going to the Constitutional Court can, of course, be done very quickly, and I think the ISC will have to decide, together with the Minister of Cooperative Governance, to do that within the next few days, approach the Constitutional Court for direct access and ask it to pronounce on this issue.
Well, it's always a pleasure speaking to you, Prof. Jaap De Visser, I beg your pardon, Professor Jaap De Visser from the Dullah Omar Institute. For more, we await now to see what happens with the elections. October, February, held over even further. We have to wait for decisions to be made, but they have to be made quickly.